the production of diesel or solar from the plastic is a new or the modern manufactured practices that have been implemented in the Gaza Strip within the 5 recent years without any standards regarding the safety measures and the protection of the people. This product is unsafe completely because it's not produced relying on the international or local standards regarding the production of this product. This waste recycled irregularly, informally, between homes, between villages, inside the domestic and residential areas. In addition to that, the emissions of this production is not handled well by the safety measures and the eco-friendly performance. In this issue, the production of these emissions in surrounding areas which will be affect the vulnerable people in all over the areas surrounding this production areas. The operation of this manufacturers or factory to produce this toxic material as air emission, which will affect the health of the people as first impacted or affected sides, in addition to the climate change and the problems relevant to the global warming aspects or issues, which will affect all of the aspects of the life in the Gaza Strip. The production of this product is unsafe and unstudied well with the governmental or by the governmental or local authorities. It would be, let me say, studied well or tested during the experimental analysis, then check up the quality of this type of oil or fuel, if I can say that, and then we can say if it is safe or not. But at all levels, as applied or carried out directly or indirectly in this sector on the ground currently in the Gaza Strip, it is not safe and it's not matching or fulfill any of the local and international eco-friendly performance standards which could manage this production within the safety measures and health impacts, in addition to the environmental problems. In addition to all of that, the production or the manufacturing and the working in this sector without the international and local standards will affect all of the environmental and health status context or elements, and will, let me say, lead to challenges will affect the vulnerable people, as I said, especially the children, pregnant women, and other susceptible or sensitive fragments of the community in the Gaza Strip. In the Gaza Strip, this is a very crowded area. More than 2,200,000 people live in this small area. It's not exceed than 387 square kilometers. If we divided the both figures, we will produce that more than 6,000 people live in each square kilometer. This crowded area, the people living in this area or under these conditions, sophisticated, overlap, complicated conditions that we live in, will be affected in the consumption of the resources, which is scarce, damaged, and leakage, in addition to the, let me say, the scarcity of these resources, in addition to the amounts of pollution or contamination generated by the people. The handling or managing of all of these elements affect all of the health status, as I said, and especially the vulnerable people like children and women. Inhaling of these emissions like carbon dioxide, sulfide oxides, nitric oxides, in addition to the ferrions and dioxins, which consist of 75 toxic chemicals as carcinogenic chemicals, can be inhaled by the vulnerable people and making, let me say, the diseases relevant to the respiratory system, in addition to the circular system, which will be affected by these chemicals by inhaling and mixing or getting inside the blood circular system in the body, in addition to the other problems relevant to the skin and eyes and other health problems related to this toxic material. In addition to all of the diseases could be happened by the emissions of these factories or this manufacturing process, the workers will be the most vulnerable and the most exposed people for these works or activities, in addition to the surrounding people in the Napurs, and the domestic or inside the residential areas, which will be affected directly or indirectly. This health status will be already affected by the safety measures. Exposure to the accidental by explosion or firing of this factory will affect directly the workers close to this activities. In addition to all of that, the environmental elements, the groundwater aquifer and the soil cultivated or agricultural lands surrounding these factories will be already affected by the deposition of these chemicals on the ground and then washed up by the rainwater or irrigation, which will be washed and the chemicals or the toxic material will be percolated or infiltrated to the groundwater aquifer, which considered as the main source of water in the Gaza Strip. We are relying completely 95% on the groundwater aquifer, which depend on the rainfall to find our water for our daily activities as domestic use, in addition to the agricultural activities in the Gaza Strip. Or what they do already currently in the Gaza Strip, they mix 30% by this fuel produced from plastic with 70% of regular fuel imported from outside of the Gaza Strip. So they diluted the bad properties of this oil by mixing with other oils. If we didn't, or if we don't apply tests or check up in experimental, according to the scientific approach on this fuel, we will not be aware what this fuel consists of, and burning of this fuel in the engines, generators, vehicles, cars, or other, let me say, motors, we will not be aware about what the consist of the emissions produced from this oil. The activities during the operation of this manufacturers should be or must be managed well according to the local and international regulations, depending on the safety measures, in addition to the protection mainstreaming toward everybody, mainly or particularly the vulnerable people, in addition to the emissions produced from burning of this emission between homes. Using of this fuel will be under many of concerns without doing scientific, let me say, analysis of this fuel to be ensured what the safety and what the level of the pollution consists of this, let me say, or inside or composed of by this fuel. Recycling of a plastic is very important to minimize the amount of the waste generated in the Gaza Strip and everywhere, which is very important to be pushed up, to be supported and controlled by the local governments, in addition to the private sector as investments, and the community within the NGOs to manage this sector. Minimizing of waste that we produce is very important to minimize the areas will be needed to build up the landfills and dumping sites. Recycling of plastic by shredding, by sorting, by raw material recovery, transported to the factories. We have 72 factories for plastic in the Gaza Strip, will be the best solutions for the waste, let me say, amount. Reject, reduce, recycle, recover as integrated solid waste management is very welcome approach to be used as integration and as management of this waste. Using the techniques to confirm or let me say to convert the plastic to oil or fuel, it will be, let me say, dangerous or threaten the people without regulations and standards that have been adopted from everybody to protect the people mainly. We are not going to let me say, to build up an income generation projects without concerning the environment as first, because the direct reflection of the environmental context and the translation of the environmental context will be directly health status as morbidity and mortality, affecting the people by the emissions of this oil between homes and villages within the residential area will be high cost, higher than the income that we will gain if we recycle the plastic by this approach. In the Gaza Strip, we have a very important clean and renewable energy resources, we have to develop this sector. The solar energy, we have a brightness and solar, let me say daytime more than 95% of the whole year. So we can rely completely on the solar energy as photovoltaic cells to reuse, or let me say to depend on the clean energy as sustainable, as renewable energy resources. This sector need to be developed by all, let me say, stakeholders, and developing this sector between homes to push up the people to rely on this source will affect the environmental context positively. In addition to the solar energy, we have wind energy here in Gaza, in addition to the waves from the shoreline region, as source of kinetic and mechanical energy could be converted to be as electricity. Many of renewable resources we have in Gaza Strip, so we can develop this sector positively and more. Instead of using this approach to produce electricity from unsafe resources, like converting the plastic to be reused as a fuel, unsafe fuel, and unknown source of let me say, of electricity. The plastic could be recycled as a plastic to produce stuffs can be used by the homes, pipes, stuffs like toys and other issues irrelevant to the food or drink. So we can use the plastic as recycling instead of converting it as a fuel, which will affect the life and the environment as a whole.